Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching us from. On behalf of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and Water Policy Center, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished chair, speakers, and participants who registered for the event. We are delighted to have you join us today at the international conference on a post-pandemic world order, navigating the new normal. The conference is a collaborative effort of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and Water Policy Center that will be held for 3 consecutive days throughout 30 different sessions. We'll be having 2 parallel sessions running simultaneously throughout the conference. The conference will feature 150 experts and speakers from 30 different countries who will be delivering the presentations and sharing the expertise with us. This is the third session of the conference. So to chair and moderate the session, it's a real pleasure to have Professor Sanjay K. Bhardwaj here with us. Sanjay K. Bhardwaj is a professor and chairperson at the Center for South Asian Studies at School of International Studies, JNU, New Delhi. His academic interests include identity, society, political, economic development, and foreign policy issues of Bangladesh in particular, and South Asian countries in general. He has been the Asia Fellow 2010-2011 at the University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, Sir Ratan Tata Fellow 2009-2010 at London School of Economics and Political Science at the Chinese Academy of Social Science ICSSR Fellow 2013 at Beijing. He has authored over 3 dozen articles and research papers on contemporary socio-political and energy issues of South Asia. Currently, he is involved in a research on India's neighborhood policy and India-Bangladesh relations. So without any further ado, let me now request Professor Sanjay K. Bhardwaj to moderate the session.
Thank you, Sunmina, for giving this, and I also extend my thanks to the director of the institute, Dr. Pramod Kumar, for this opportunity and to chair this session. This is a very important session, and there are a number of speakers, almost 5 speakers I have in this session, and they are speaking on different aspects of new international order and foreign policy issues of India and other South Asian countries. So I would let me briefly introduce the 5 speakers who are going to speak in this session. I have first speaker would be Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. He's the Distinct Fellow in Vivekananda International Foundation, India, and Visiting Fellow. Nice. He is going to speak on India's foreign policy challenges in the post-COVID-19. Then I have second speaker as Professor Khadga Kesi. He is head Department of International Relations and Diplomacy, Tribhuvan University, Nepal. He is going to speak on global and regional scenario and Nepal's foreign policy ahead. Then third speaker is Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. Dr. Rajiv Ranjan is Assistant Professor in Shanghai University. He is also Visiting Fellow of ICS, India, and also in NICE, Nepal. He is going to speak on post-COVID-19 world order, political system, leadership, and governance. Then I have the next speaker would be Asta Chadda. She is she's a graduate student and this to make an Asian Pacific University, Japan. She's going to speak on impact of India's COVID-19 strategy and its implication for its role in the Indo-Pacific region. And then the last speaker would be Dr. Priya Kumari. She's also assistant professor in Lady Sir Ram College, Delhi University. She's going to speak on India and the European Union, a multilateral world order. So I would ask the first speaker. All the speakers have about 15 minutes. Please stick with the time so that we can have a good discussion time. We can have more questions from the participants. So I request the first speaker, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, to deliver his lecture. Yes, are you there, Professor?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I'm there.
Great. You go ahead, please.
Thank you, Professor Bhardwaj, the chair of the session. Excellencies and esteemed participants, it is a great pleasure for me to participate at this prestigious virtual conference on post-pandemic world order. Thank you, Dr. Jawaharlal and NICE for this invitation. In the earlier plenary, we heard on key issues from prominent speakers, the issues that are confronting us, and broadly, how will they impact, especially in the wake of COVID-19, once in a century event. I'll try to cover that have been given to me. I believe that like the water, the global order will find its own level in due course, but may have destructive ramifications if the current trends continue. We do not live in a vacuum. The world is in a total disarray. We are witnessing Cold War 2.0 with the difference between China and the US and the two superpowers, which are one is declining and the other is in a hurry to displace it, and hence the friction. Probably China rushed into where angels fear to tread. China's credibility due to its policies, certain policies, especially with regard to the COVID itself, has been at its lowest at this juncture. And its rise is being questioned, especially by the West, due to its expansionist policies, lack of transparency, and wolf warrior diplomacy, which has done more harm than good to it. We are simultaneously wading through multiple orders, and between orders, we see bipolar, unipolar, and multipolar in a fragmented world. Powerful countries talk of multilateralism, but follow unilateral and internationalist policies. Actions speak louder. We are in a breakdown mode. International solidarity and bonhomie is missing. During the last decade, several countries, especially in the Middle East, have witnessed consequences of the Arab Spring. And now it's the second edition is in display in Lebanon, Sudan, Algeria, Iran, Iraq, and elsewhere as people demand their basic rights and governments, mostly autocratic ones, either don't want to or don't know how to do it. On the contrary, the earlier ones like Libya, Syria, and Yemen are still live wires and ongoing conflicts and civil wars, courtesy external interventions. The rich oil economies are facing economic crunch. Regional organizations, whether it is EU, SARC, or GCC, or NAFTA, all are facing their own moments of reality, embroiled in real politics. We have seen what happened to Brexit, and we are now beginning to see what is happening to Grexit. And also the East Mediterranean, Turkey's rise is also equally questionable. And how it is playing out in the Eastern Mediterranean will have to be seen.
And your camera is not on. If you can do it,
sorry.
The camera, yeah.
Friends, we have heard that COVID-19 is the biggest disruptor, and especially in the foreign policy and economy, as well as in the public health. So I believe that there are three H's that are going to be extremely important. One is health, public health, and economic health. Second is hygiene, and third is habitat. In my view, we should, if we think, then health should be given same priority as the defense of a nation. Because if your people are not good enough, they're not strong enough, you cannot progress either way. Economic revival and getting out of global recession is going to be a major challenge. Conflicts all over have not abated. Terrorism and other conventional and unconventional security threats remain a clear and present danger, especially as they continue to find status sponsors. Trade wars and protectionism are at their highest. Multilateralism is under threat as never before, since the high power, especially under President Trump, has decimated them as they did not serve their national interests, because they consider all these organizations as an instrument of their foreign policy. United Nations, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization, because he seems to have a disdain for multilateralism. Unilateral sanctions are creating greater conflicts with long-term consequences. But no country, howsoever powerful, can do things alone. A new global world order has to emerge and will emerge. What will be its shape still remains to be seen and too early to comment, as everyone had said. But newer geopolitical alliances are emerging. For example, the Alliance of Democracies, multilateralism like UN reforms, BRICS, AU, EU, RIC, the umpteen number, and the Quad recently, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, another one in our area. They are coming out of long-term conflicts and simmering mistrust among regions and countries. Trump's re-election or Biden's election will decide a lot on the outcome of the global world order. Outcome of US elections may change the focus and conflictual American policy choices for course correction, which will have their own challenges for India. At least China and Iran are counting for a change in US leadership. We are at an inflection point, and India is not an exception. The foremost task, in my view, of India's foreign policy is to enable the domestic transformation of it. And by this, we mean making possible the transformation of India's economy, society, while promoting our values of pluralism, democracy, and secularism. It requires us to work for a supportive external environment that is extremely important for any country, which should be peaceful, which should be constructive, and enable us to concentrate on our growth and development. Because we have 1/6 of the world population we need to look after, and we consider our neighborhood as also our responsibility in that sense. So for a secure and nation building, it is essential that we have a benevolent world order, but that's probably just a non-realistic expectations. So we have to be reliable actors ourselves and providers from the global supply and value chains. And hence the policy of Atmanirbhar self-reliance that Prime Minister Modi launched recently has been embedded in that objective. At the broadest level, our foreign policy seeks security and support from the international community as we build and transform our society and economy. Soft power, neo-colonialism, or fight against it. A large and expanding economic base and opportunities for the world. A benign rising power, believing in global goods and dividends and making them available to all are the major ingredients for success with enough political capital and resolve. Well, that will be extremely essential. Major challenges to India, in my view, will remain the China-Pakistan nexus. Since the Sino-Indian conflict and border skirmishes continue despite Wuhan and Chennai Connect. India has a neighborhood first policy that entails Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and follows a non-reciprocal policy with the neighbors, but creating greater trust and lasting stakes among the neighbors will be the priority. We will have to be more sensitive to their concerns and identity and territorial issues. Only option is continued dialogue and trust, since India can be the engine of growth for the region if its security concerns are addressed. And I must underline that particular fact. Of course, to serve their interest, they will continue to leverage India and China, but eventually will understand and be able to differentiate and realize which approach and country is more beneficial for them in the long term. For managing the US and Russia would be a key choice for India as far as strategic autonomy is concerned, so that its international interests are served. The US versus China and Russia rivalry will play out and will continue to play out. West Asia is the most important extended neighborhood, which is highly unpredictable at this stage and could lead to much greater impact and instability for us. New dynamic and power equations due to global geoeconomics and geopolitics are emerging. UAE and other Sunni Arab states might normalize relations with Israel, thereby creating a US-centric alliance against the China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and Qatar. Wading through these will require greater and sagacious moves and policy choices for India. Hedging on all sides may not remain an option as US withdraws gradually and China expands its footprints through a security and economic matrix. East Asia, with greater connectivity and strategic outreach and much deeper defense and security engagement, will require greater space in navigating our Indo-Pacific strategy. Africa should figure prominently in our futuristic policies beyond 2020, because I believe that from the middle of this century onwards, it could be the Asian African century whose coordinates are yet to be engraved. India must continue to use its democracy, secular and civilizational heritage and ingredients as part of its soft power diplomacy. While the COVID continues to take its toll, it is low cost but has lasting impact. We have done so. We have done that in the International Solar Alliance. We have done it by International Yoga Day. We have done it through medical diplomacy, the food, the Bollywood, the culture, and the people-to-people exchanges, even if virtually, are extremely important. This could even include India's software power, I must say, and knowledge economy achievements, and share and care attitude, more so as the world moves into the AI-driven Industrial Revolution 4.0. More importantly, India being the first responder during catastrophic situations, be it COVID or natural disasters or evacuations from conflict zones, or for that matter, peacekeeping operations, provide a key edge to India, especially in the neighborhood. Indian story needs to be more convincing, and India has to have and speak from the position of strength. We will have to look at the foreign policy from the prism of national interest. Be it America first or India first, there are four basic ingredients: cooperation, competition, conflict, and coexistence. They have to move on in certain ways, but as long as the conflict is minimized, it would be useful for all of us. We always had a good international standing, but during PM Modi's time, it has become robust, responsive, and action-oriented. And I'm talking objectively on this aspect. India's visibility and high-level interactions have increased. You might doubt and dispute the results, what is happening, especially in the neighborhood, but that is not only one country's hands. It takes two to tango. We follow the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family, as was mentioned by Mr. Shishadacharya also. And that is how it should be looked at. We have decided on basically five principles as to how India is going to engage. And there it wants to be a voice of moderation, an advocate of dialogue, and a proponent of international law. So these five principles, and this year as India has become a member of the UN non-permanent Security Council seat and will be hosting G20 in 2022, so much more depends on India. Has been invited to be a part of G7. So it'll have to work strategically on its strategic autonomy, and given its aversion to alliances, I think it will seek greater and strategic alignments with different countries and different, whether it is regional or sub-regional cooperation. So the key priorities have to be new opportunities for progress, an effective response to international system, reforming the multilateral system, a comprehensive approach to international peace and security, promoting technology with a human touch as a driver of solutions. And what is the 5S approach, which is common sense? We have had Panchsheel earlier, but now can be looked at this way. First, as it stands for Samman, means respect for one another. It is extremely important. Second is Samvad, the dialogue. We need to talk. It's important to talk. Sahyog, cooperation, Shanti, peace, and to create conditions for universal samriddhi, that is prosperity. So I believe that we have our neighborhood first policy, Act East policy, Act West policy. We are part of large number of international organizations. We work together, but we are seeing what is happening on our borders at the moment, the kind of the uprising that is taking place through the Chinese growth, the Turkish growth in the region. So we have to be extremely cautious, and we have to play our cards extremely well as far as this thing comes. Only one word I would like to say, that SAARC has not worked that well, even though India has tried several times. And since the webinar is being hosted in Nepal, it is extremely important that we need to have Pakistan desist from its terrorist activities. That's the only thing that India has a problem with. And I don't think that simple isolation of Pakistan will do. It has to be persuaded by its friends, so-called friends, who consider it a great friend like China and some other countries, that it has to desist from doing that, because that is the only thing that will save itself from its own doings. So therefore, I would say that it should not turn into a rogue power or a rogue country. We are together in this. We can't choose our neighbors. We have to grow together. And that has been the policy. That should be the policy. Of course, the competition between India and China within the region and outside is going to be a reality. And it is agreed, everyone. But whether that has to be confrontational is something needs to be decided by China, because it is a bigger power. It is trying to contain India within its own South Asian power mold. But so what happens then? In that case, India will have to move out of the region and make some, like Alliance of Democracy or like-minded countries, or Quad, or for that matter, which are not necessarily China antagonistic as far as India is concerned. We are not going against China in that sense. We have even invited Russia to be part of it. So we feel that India has always followed a peaceful path because it is in its own interest. India has followed a path of progress and development of its neighbors because it is its own national interest. And I believe that we need to work together, and China and India can coexist, can work together in the region. We are part of several organizations. As we talk, we are going to have the SCO military consultations and exercises and whatnot. But it is important that the territorial integrity is respected by every country. I will stop here, and any questions, I'll be very happy to take. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Ambassador Anil. Very insightful presentation you had made, you had pointed out many significant issues that is taking place on international fora. Particularly, you have focused on the realignment is taking place. That different countries are aligned with the different countries, particularly in Asia, in Pashmi Asia, as well as in the Southeast Asia, Asian countries. You have also focused about the multilateralism, and in that particularly you have talked about the Alliance for Democracy, and that's very important. It's very significant that all the democratic countries, how they are coming together. But most important thing that about India's foreign policy, you have come out about the domestic systemic pressures. That what are the domestic systemic pressures? Where in India about 700 to 800 million people vote at a time, and they are very significant stakeholders in making of India's foreign policy, and particularly considering the India's soft power strength, that how they can approach to the international community. And there you try to make it that in how you are adjusting India's foreign policy into the international systemic pressure. So it's well presented. Of course, you have also pointed out about the challenges and in the challenges you categorically mentioned about China and Pakistan. Definitely you will have many questions on that, but you have also explored the opportunities, particularly in the sense of opportunity of exploring the neighborhood, as well as strengthening the eastward approach and exploring the possibilities in African countries. And all these issues you have very categorically highlighted and pointed out about the India's foreign policy trend. Of course, there would be a question on you that how do you find the state power in post-COVID international world order? That how do you define the state power would be a question. But there are other questions you can also see in the box. So now I request the second speaker, Professor Khadga Casey. He's going to speak on global and regional scenario and Nepal's foreign policy ahead. So please, are you there, Professor?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Please go ahead. Now it's your time.
Okay, good morning. Namaste from Kathmandu. Professor Sanjay, chair of the session, organizer, and distinguished speakers and valued participants. Thank you very much, Pramodji and Nish, for hosting this webinar. And it was great to listen inaugural session and the first speakers of the third consecutive session. I'll speak like a very contemporary global scenario in brief, and then we'll talk something about regional frameworks, how they have been performing, and our COVID flight and probability of the post-COVID scenario and our foreign policy. So far as global scenario, it seems like that the new Cold War has begun between China and the US, especially in trade and diplomatic retaliation. Recently, when United States of America closed down the Chinese consulate in Texas, was retaliated by China in Guangzhou. Then they do have more face-off kind in South China Sea, interchangeably, and a lot of like blame game even during the COVID, post-COVID, or undergoing the discussion between China and United States of America. So that is the most important recent development in the global international affairs or power relations. And Russia has assured and then become assertive, especially since after 2014, when Russia rolled back the geopolitics after Crimea case. The Western Bloc, NATO, and United States of America sanctioned against Russia. Then Russia joined with China. Russia came closer to China, had agreed to sell her petrol and gas, which is almost more than what she used to sell to EU members before 2014. There has made some kind of strategic partnership between Russia and China. So in the meantime, Russia, when Putin has again legitimized for next 16 years, so that has made a strong leadership. In international relations, of course, idiosyncrasy, the leadership also matters a lot, so that Russian assertion in global affairs will be more like assertive from now on, because she has already proven her credential in Syria, her presence in Syria, and of course, economic like reassertion. And even recently, when Russia has brought out new vaccine as a Sputnik, the second rename of like her first satellite in 1950s. So that was another R&D, research and development, science and technology also. Russia, of course, Russia has the still largest number of missiles and then fighter plane or military arms and ammunition. Even today, in defense perspectives, is still one of the mighty country. More than that, because of economic restoration, and in the meantime, having more partnership with China, especially in petrol and gas deal, and moreover, the vaccine which she has brought out for the first time. Others are just talking, and she has already brought out and has been like almost recognized by Donald Trump as well. Say once Donald Trump said that the vaccine might work. So these are the some indicators. Because of that, Russia has already become in a multipolar world. Russia, China, and United States of America are now in the main ground player of the in the ground on the ground. So Russian assertion, somehow Russian strategic partnership with China, India. Also, we heard some like role of Russian foreign minister in Galwan face-off. That was just for talk. I don't have evidences, however. So now let me talk something about EU. So EU is in a serious dilemma. EU is a deteriorating regional institution, which was taken as a role model regional frameworks until recently. However, because of Brexit, in the meantime, because of shrinking economy of EU members, and she is a serious dilemma, whether she has to continue her alliance with United States of America or realigns with China because of economic interest. You know that in pandemic, in COVID, Chinese military, Chinese medical diplomacy has contributed a lot in EU member. In Italy, in Austria, in many European country, they got medical stuff from China. Or medical like persons, medical professional also work in Europe, not even in North and Western Europe. So it has signified that EU is in serious dilemma, and EU seems like not that much, very much influential global like partners in global power relation. However, she has dispersed $16 billion for EU. Mostly they will spend in EU members country, especially for post-COVID fund. While looking at the post-COVID fund, EU has dispersed 16 billion, and Germany, France has 1 billion plus, and United Kingdom 744, and Japan 769. Among the OECD countries, their grant level of grant is also shrinking, and most of the OECD countries are located in EU area region. So this is another scenario. Now let's see India, our immediate neighbor. So India is seemed like shifting her non-aligned foreign policy to issue-based multi-aligned. While reading Ambassador Excellency Jaishankar, Foreign Minister, incumbent Foreign Minister of India, that India has begun to review her non-aligned foreign policy and shift to multi-aligned, especially based on issue. And she has also started to, she has already implemented Act East foreign policy, unlike Look East. So Act East and multi-aligned for non-aligned. This is another like Indian foreign policy shift in recent days, unlike Nehruvian idealism. Then India seems like more rivalry partnership with China. Rivalry partnership, the terminology what I've been using here is that, you know, India, despite her border disputes with China, she has been heavily engaged with China. She has had almost 90 billion around trade transaction with India. Despite the recent Gulf War face-off, so there are some huge and there are some like, you know, unofficial individual anti-Chinese like stop boycotting movement in India. However, Indian establishment never ever said or made any statement officially that she would lay off, she would be stay away from engaging China. So it seems like that India still wants to have cooperation, partnership with China, and China also doesn't like to make disenchant India that much longer, because she wants to go together with India in larger extent despite their territorial issue. This is the like this is like the major powers, United States of America, China, Russia, EU, and India's plight at the moment. So having said this, what I have to I would like to share a couple of things about the COVID. For example, COVID-19 has, in my perspective also, which has largely ascertained by Francis Fukuyama, who is one of the icon of neocon and neoliberal third, and who has brought out the End of History, the book in 1990s, who has recently brought out an article that you know, Amartya Sen, who has given a thesis in 90s that democracy can handle pandemic, drought like crisis very efficiently compared to autocratic regime. However, that has been challenged by Francis Fukuyama recently in Foreign Affairs Journal, that look, the per million death in North America and Western Europe compared to per million death in North America and Western Europe almost question the performances, efficiency of state institution in Western Europe and North America, especially United States of America. There is a 500 plus per million death in United States of America, 625 in United Kingdom, whereas so-called soft authoritarian and authoritarian East Asia, Japan has 7.8, Singapore 5 plus, Vietnam 0, China 3.5, and this is the scenario in East Asia. So it seems like that if you strengthen, consolidate public institution, state institution that can address the pandemic, national security, or any crises. So that has yet to be proven. We cannot conclude. However, these discourses are coming up from the United States of America, from the neocon and neoliberal thinkers. So that has questioned the state institution, and the democracy alone is a kind of like Ramban in our like, you know, philosophy to resolve every crisis. That is the one discourses we have to start from now on. So in the meantime, how much OECD's countries has been contributing to cope up the pandemic. So most of the OECD countries they themselves are facing serious crises due to the pandemic. So they are almost non-perform. They could not perform well to support needy African, Asian, and Latin American countries when they were seriously facing in pandemic. So in this country, in this situation, paradoxical situation, theoretically, ideologically, ideally, they are democracy. However, their performance seems questionable even at home, and so that they are almost non-visible in international cooperation. So that is the one scenario. So let me talk about populism versus multilateralism. As Ambassador Anil and some other speakers also already shared that the multilateralism has been serious almost like, threat. Why UN cannot play the proactive role in pandemic? WHO has facing so many troubles from the so-called OECDs and super and major powers. And why WHO has been blaming by even United States of America. So why? This is because of populism. America first, even Xi Jinping, even Modi ji, even like French Prime Minister or Russian Prime Ministers, they are all talking about their country first. On the one hand, probably because they are losing their affordability to get access to global affairs. On the other hand, probably their policy is more hawkish, more like populist. So their engagement in regional frameworks and multilateralism has been shrink. So this has questioned country like our small powers, medium-sized country, are their last resort is regional framework and multilateral diplomatic frameworks like United Nations. The role of United Nations has been yeah.
Professor, 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll wrap up in 2 minutes. So these are the situation. And now let me talk about my country. We in Nepal, we are one of the oldest nation state in South Asia. As a nation state, we were never colonized, and we are the oldest nation state in South Asia and located between two giant neighbors. So being we want to have a very balanced foreign policy, and we anticipate a similar reciprocity from our neighbors. We never ever ally with any Quad, IPS, or any other military alliances in the past. We want to remain non-aligned. We always want to follow the Panchashil. So because of this ground reality, I urge our neighbors, even China and India. For example, India, quite often many speakers say that neighborhood first. So sometime we would like to request our neighbors not try to be paradoxical in ideal and real politics. Ideal neighborhood first, but in real politics a bit more hegemonic, and not fond of recognizing other sovereign equality. That should be better off for both Nepal and China and Nepal and India. So if we do have any disputes, especially territorial disputes, trade dispute, transit disputes, we always want to resolve every dispute through peaceful means. We never ever want to change our neighbors. We never ever de-recognize the concern and interest and sensitivity of our neighbors. We never ever want to play with one neighbors against another neighbors, and we never ever want to use our soil against another neighbors. So these are our fundamental intact like foreign policy guidelines and priorities, which we have been adhering, following for a long while. Because of that, we are existing amid these two great powers. So for us, our foreign policy is always non-aligned, Panchashil, and based on national interest, and we always like to treat by our neighbors and regional powers and global powers that Nepal is a sovereign, independent country, unlike constructivism. Constructivism, culture, religion, proximity are there everywhere, but that doesn't guide the foreign policy. Foreign policy guided by national interests. So we do have a very good relations, very close cultural, religious relations with our neighbors. However, these are not the primary factors to guide the foreign policy. So we do want to form, evolve, and consolidate our foreign policy on the basis of sovereign equality and guided by national interest. In the meantime, peaceful dialogue, negotiation are the only means to resolve the conflict. And third one is, we never ever want to play any other neighbors in between or against or any other neighbors. So that try to have such dialogues and negotiation or this sort of webinars, conferences, seminars, interaction among the intellectuals and stakeholders will make more clear among each other, so that we always remain a very close, good neighbor. So there is no way to be away from our friendship. So that was our almost, it's a kind of like state standoff. But in personally, I myself also believe on very equal partnership, and for the benefit of both country, or for the country benefit of each other. Thank you very much once again, and I will be more than happy to respond if there will be any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Khadga, for definitely bringing all the aspects together, particularly the emerging trends in international community. And there you try to highlight about the reemergence of Russia's role in global affairs. And there you have talked about the strength of Russia in many issues like military power, science, technology. They are also inventing vaccine for COVID-19 and its role in the Syria and all that. Certainly, it has a question that in today's context, particularly while we are talking about the COVID-19, how do you define a state, by a military power or by an economic power? Because China is trying to dominate the world moreover by the economic power rather than the military. Of course, is also important, but they are basically trying to have more economic initiatives worldwide. Then, of course, you have also talked about the European Union that is deteriorating, particularly. Of course, I can say this is from Brexit, you can say it's a deglobalization phase has been started. But certainly, you talk about India's foreign policy is shifting from NAM to multilateralism. I feel it that NAM itself was a multilateral initiative, had come against the two world powers, that is Russia, USSR, and USA. So that was also multilateralism, and it was going on. Multi-alignment was there. Of course, you have also come out with the neighboring countries, and there in the neighboring countries, India's foreign policy or India's neighborhood policy, in particularly in context of Nepal, there you talked about that this is moreover hegemonic. But I feel it that Nepal and India has very unique relations that none of other country had that kind of. We have roti beti ka rishta, and I think there is moreover that in the last many decades that we had been coexisting with in peaceful manner, and I hope it would go in future. Now I invite the next speaker is Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. Dr. Rajiv Ranjan is going to speak post-COVID-19 world order, political system, leadership, and governance. Yeah, Rajiv, it's now your floor is with you. Are you there?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, am I audible?
Okay. Yeah. I'm
okay,
hearing.
Thank you. So let me first thank Dr. Pramod for inviting me for this webinar. I think it's very timely intervention when everybody is talking about the world order. And we also talked about how the bilateral relationship is coming up. So I'm going to talk about here the post-pandemic world order and the political leadership system and governance. I think Professor Khadga has already touched upon Francis Fukuyama. So I would be also drawing some lessons from Francis Fukuyama. But let me first, because in the first session I heard about the world order. So let me define the first, what is world order? Of course, there is not a very well-defined and agreed definition of world order. There are contested definitions. But for the sake of definition, what we believe is the world order as defined as a body of rules, norms, and institutions that governs the relationship between the key players. Now again, here comes a very stark difference when we talk about whether it's a world order or whether it's an international order. So when they're a scholar like Noam Chomsky, when we talk about world order, he believed that the world order is created by the US by creating a multiple institution like Bretton Woods system, even United Nations. But if you talk about international order, that is, comes under the rules and regulation formed by the United Nations and other institutions. So there is a difference between world order and international order. Since I study China, so let me give you a Chinese perspective on what is world order and international order. One of the scholars in China named Fu Ying, she has written a book in Chinese, Kan Sirche, is translated into English now, See the World. And she has written a lot of articles, and she says that the China is a kind of ready or agree to be part of international order rather than the world order created by the United States. And again, if you, there's a debate, a huge debate on the concept of liberal order or world order. And if you see, even in the States, there are debate about, so the professor Charles Glaser believed that this whole debate about the liberal order is nothing but an extension of United States foreign policy. So they want to keep exactly a status quo within the world system to continue with this world system or world order, we say. Now we talked about what is the contemporary world order. Like after the post-Cold War, we have seen US came to dominate the whole system. And I borrow from here Fukuyama. Well, and he wrote a very good article, and that created a lot of buzzword in international community and among the scholarship, End of History. Recently, in 2018, he has a kind of given a speech, and his whole thesis was that he is postponing the end of history. And he was forced to postpone this end of history. And there are various factors that contributed in postponing the whole concept of end of history. I will go into detail a little later. Now, if we analyze the pre-pandemic of world order, then we see that there is a kind of there is a debate or shattering of liberal order due to the rise of China. We also see there is a kind of US-China rivalry that is intensifying. And we also see the middle power or the developing power, rising power like India or Australia, Japan, they're trying to bring a kind of multipolar world order. So these things were in pre-world a pre-pandemic world. This pandemic has a kind of affected whole kind of every walks of life, even if it's economy, political, security, everything. It has killed millions of travel and still fear even in common masses. Now coming here, and we see that different state has reacted in a different manner to control or contain this COVID, whether it's Taiwanese model or even a Singapore model. Professor Khadga has talked about in the East Asia, how the East Asian country have successfully contained. Now, so that's begin to debate whether which model of governance is successful in containing the coronavirus. So now, even if you see that there are China communist state, then you have a South Korea, a kind of a very strong democracy, where you have a Singapore that is a kind of a between, whether it's a democracy or an authoritarian. So every so you cannot say that which model is more successful. Now, that brings us to question of what the leadership has played, the role of the leadership in this controlling the pandemic. We have seen, if you go into the ancient times, we have seen how the Plato or Kautilya or Machiavelli was emphasizing on training the leaders, in that time, training the kings. Now, if we bring back that training into the contemporary world, and then if you compare the Prime Minister Modi, President Xi, even Lee Hsien Loong of PM of Singapore, President Moon of South Korea, compare that training with President Donald Trump, or PM of Italy Conte, or President of France Emmanuel Macron. So if you see, none of these latter leadership has a training in the leadership. If you see, Prime Minister Modi has ruled Gujarat for a long time, so he has a kind of leadership training. If you see, it has been like promoted from governing the provinces to and then rise up. So that's why, like even in the South Korea also. But if you compare the French president Macron, like Trump, it was like training in the leadership. They were given a chance. Someone can ask why India failed to contain the coronavirus. That we are now a kind of, there are every day like thousands of cases are coming up. But my understanding is that, again, in same vein about the international scenario, it's not, we have lacking the international leadership. It also not the international structure, like WHO failed to contain. So, and if you ask, so let me give you a kind of, like when lockdown was announced, then we have seen thousands of laborers walking on the street, walking on the roads, highways. So that's this migrant labor. That is, in our society, provided sufficient opportunity.
Your voice is breaking. Can you, all right. In fact, others are listening clearly.
Am I audible?
Yeah, I think it was breaking. You go ahead, I think. Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
You can, yeah, you
so
can
there
go
is
ahead.
like, okay, so let me go and why leadership failed. So John Mearsheimer wrote a book, Why Leaders Lie. And then he says that the leaders are most likely to push them to mislead the very public that has elected them. So in a way, Mearsheimer believes that the leaders tend to lie to their own citizens more often than they lie to each other. That means they lie to mongering. When leaders cannot.
Rajiv sir, there is, sorry to interrupt, this is Priya, one of the participants. Rajiv sir, your voice actually is breaking. Sir, Sanjay sir, I just wanted to let you know this.
Rajiv sir, you may switch off your video, then they'll be clear.
Okay, okay. So am I okay. Let me do that. Okay, okay. Am I audible? Okay. So Mearsheimer believed that the fear mongering, when the leaders cannot convince. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
Okay. So he believes that when the leaders
not exactly
cannot convince the public of threats, they foresee and so deceive the public. Now coming through the lens of morality and then ability of government to fulfill its domestic responsibility, and then you can go to project your image at the international level. Now Kissinger, national basis. So we have failed to govern or kind of give a policies on international level, and we have seen that 2008 financial crisis has brought G20, but in this pandemic, mainly on providing $5 trillion to infuse in the market, not about trying to give a policy suggestion or directive to contain the virus. Now, So here also, if you go to now, I comes to the political system. So if you believe again, the Francis Fukuyama, I started with Francis Fukuyama. He wrote, and I think Professor Khadga has already gone through that. Now, the containing a wall in trust in government. Kishore Mahbubni, a former foreign minister of Singapore, he says that this COVID has a kind of like increased the power transfer from Western countries, like China, South Korea, Singapore has a kind of like most actively control the COVID. So he believed that there is a power shift is going on in international order. Now, so what is like all building? He says that we are trying to recognize and that the constructivist school of thought believes that in a recognition. So every state is try to assert its identity. Now coming to that, we have like order, whether it's say Putin, Laden, or Black Lives Matter, or Me Too, or gay marriage, or Brexit, or European nationalism, or anti-immigration political movements. These are all coming to like kind of like assert their identity in that, whether we are moving from a single theater to multiplex. That the Amitabh Acharya is saying that we are moving to the multiplex system where everyone can.
Rajiv, you have 2 minutes only.
Can watch their own movies. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we are moving to the era of home theater, where even in house, we want to see what movie we like, whether daughter, whether it's like a son or daughter. They want to preference it. So we are moving on to assert their own identity. They want to watch their own movies that is coming off a home theater. So let me conclude by saying that this pandemic has eroded the distinction between system of government and their legitimacy. Having said that, it also led to a stiff ideological leadership competition between China and US. So in some scholars believe that we are going to have leader less, maybe 10 to 20 years. Now, last point that I would like to say that this pandemic, this pandemic has pushed us to create a global governance kind of thing that is not only for health, security, and other non-traditional security. I'm open to any Q&A in the latter session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. Actually, I could not listen your half of the lecture very clearly. It was just breaking. But what impression I got it that you initially you were talking about the world order, and I do find that yes, that liberal international order was dominated by neoliberalist ideology, and that had been adopted many of the countries, including China. China was also agreed with the Washington Consensus and adopted market economy for its economic development and become the largest beneficiary of globalization. Today, things are different. But you try to understand this international global order or the liberal democratic institutions. But of course, there are a question mark has been arisen that most of the liberal democratic institutions could not handle this COVID-19 crisis, the health crisis, very effectively, including the international institutions like WHO could not give a very strong support to the international community to fight against COVID-19. what do I find by getting this, that there are also new trends are emerging, that where we have find that about more than 2 billion people are in the informal sector, and they are suffering a lot in this COVID-19 crisis. And I do find in this liberal democratic institutions, what the labor class, the labor class would become a very strong voice in post COVID-19 world order, where the labor rights or the poor people's voices would dominate the international community and international institutions. So thank you very much for making your presentation. I unfortunately could not listen what exactly you wanted to say about the second half of your presentation, but of course, if there is any question, we will certainly take it further. Now I do request the next speaker is Astha Chadha. Astha Chadha is going to speak on impact of India's COVID-19 strategy and its implications for its role in the Indo-Pacific region. Astha, are you there?
Yes, Professor. Hello.
Yes, Astha, you can go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that generous introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and namaste. I'm here representing Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, Graduate School of Asia Pacific Studies in Japan. I would share my screen because I'd like to talk through my presentation. All right, so my focus is India's COVID-19 strategy and its relations in the Indo-Pacific. When the COVID-19 hit India and the policy makers began tracing down what to do about the pandemic, India did not have as many cases, but several steps were taken by the Indian government right in the beginning, which is right in March, to curtail international travel, to impose lockdowns, and as well as try and cooperate with, on an international level with organizations like SAARC. So this was India's COVID-19 situation. So as of now, India has over 3 million cases and over 60,000 deaths reported. In terms of cases per million, India is not faring the worst in the world. However, in terms of total cases, India is, I think, on third from the top, only after US and Brazil. Although there are signs of inevitable economic contraction and there's an extreme pressure on India's health infrastructure, not to forget the migrant crisis that happened. India also faced, unfortunately, a lot of issues at its border and a lot of hostility within its own neighborhood. And given that, India's COVID-19 policy becomes a very important tool to analyze what pillars shape India's pandemic policy and what are the factors that are truly affecting it apart from the pandemic itself. So this was the COVID-19 situation in SAARC. This graph is from the SAARC website. India introduced, right in March, as I mentioned, its first ever lockdown, which is the world's largest lockdown ever. And given that, India was praised for initially making a SAARC fund and contributing 10 million as an initial contribution to fight the pandemic, with contributions from the other member nations as well. But India took the lead, because we realized as a nation that India was not sufficient in terms of handling its own medical emergencies. There was a lot of import, we were depending on from countries like China. However, a lot of geopolitical events that happened changed the way India is currently operating within the pandemic. So the key questions I will try and talk about very quickly here are: one, what are the main pillars of India's COVID-19 strategy? And second, what factors have really shaped India's COVID-19 strategy, keeping in mind their significance in India's realist calculations? So I will talk about how India is not just trying to balance the power, regionally as well as globally, but also about how India is trying to emerge as an aspirational power, trying to emerge as a leading power. So these are the pillars of India's COVID-19 strategy, which I identified. One was India's role as a pharmacy of the world. India's medical diplomacy is not something new. However, the pandemic offered India a new opportunity to engage more with the world community, try and offer as many medicines and as many equipment. It is worth noting that under the current Prime Minister Modi's Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, which is the self-reliant India policy, we started producing our own PPE equipment, which around March was zero. And now the value of that industry is $960 million, which is within a span of 6 months. And India has become the second largest PPE equipment manufacturer in the world, second only to China. Then there are development partnerships with other nations. India, of course, has been on it, given India's larger commitment to the Indo-Pacific strategy or policy or vision, as we could say. But within that, development partnerships are very important, especially given the pandemic. It's important to strengthen the health infrastructure, and as well as connectivity is very, very important, be it within the Indian Ocean, be it within the SAARC nations, or be it on land, among nations such as Iran, Afghanistan, India. So India is focusing on both of these as the second pillar of its COVID-19 strategy. The third is territorial and economic sovereignty, again, owing to the clashes that happened at the border, with China, as well as a lot of other border disputes India is currently in with Pakistan, with Nepal. India's territorial and economic sovereignty became a key point where India started, trying to utilize its medical diplomacy in order to engage more with the world community. But now let's talk about what are the main factors that I identified. So there are some factors affecting India's COVID-19 strategy, which I just spelled out. One is India-China relations, of course, that have this year, India was to and is celebrating 70 years of diplomatic partnership and diplomatic relations with China. So it is a very important year for India-China relations. However, given what happened in the Galwan Valley, it has had a large impact domestically as well as internationally on how people are viewing the India-China relations and their rivalry. The second is US policy towards India's neighborhood has also affected how India is playing out its COVID-19 strategy. I will talk about it soon. And the third is India's ambition to be an influential power. I am looking at it from a realistic point of view, from a realist, as in the international relations theory of realism point of view, as how India is trying to be more influential. And in the words of our foreign minister, S. Jaishankar, he said that it's time that India tries to be a leading power and not just a balancing power. So I'll try and talk about this as well. First, let's talk about the India-China relations amid the COVID-19. Well, 2020, as I said, marked 7 decades of diplomatic relationship between India and China, but the Galwan Valley clash was not the first. It was preceded by Depsang, Chumar, and even Doklam in 2017. Which kind of shows, what is happening. There is already an existing tension at the border with an LAC, the line of actual control, which spells out the border between India and China not yet being mutually agreed upon. So given those things, and given the fact that India revoked, autonomous status of Kashmir, and now Ladakh is a union territory, given those in the background, the India-China relationship, of course, seems to be on a downhill. And given the martyrdom of 20 Indian soldiers on the Chinese side, we do not know because that was not announced. But given that there was a huge, domestic uprising in terms of people wanting to oppose, Chinese products, and hence the government banned 59 key Chinese applications. A lot of Chinese IT firms, a lot of Chinese construction firms were barred from investing into Indian key and strategic, as I could say, Indian highway projects, as well as from the 4G upgradation by state-run telecoms such as BSNL. So China cannot now bid for these projects or invest in them as of now. Given that, India's main challenge regarding China is not just to confront it, it's also about trying to build its own capacities and capabilities, which is the key point of self-reliant India policy, is not to, as Prime Minister said in his Independence Day speech, is not to isolate a country such as India from its neighbors, but in fact to engage more And that can only be possible if India is self-reliant and self-sufficient in terms of its resources and what it can offer to its neighbors in terms of a development partnership. That being said, India's main challenge with Beijing, of course, remains not just managing pandemic amicably and in a nice way, sharing technologies, they're sharing information, but also creating a very stable border, which as of today, I was reading the news and it is not yet been agreed upon, despite a lot of disengagement talks happening. There is no such progress being seen on that front. Another thing is engaging in the geo-economic equations in the region is very important for India, instead of being, isolating itself in some way, let's say India pulling out of RCEP because of unfair, the deal, it thought it was unfair. It would be beneficial for a nation such as big as India to become very lucrative for foreign investment post-pandemic, to become very lucrative for other nations to come and invest in the nation, in the region, because India is big enough with a lot of working population. We have a better labor force in that sense, a younger population, as was talked about in the inaugural sessions as well. Thirdly, India's COVID-19 policy, I think, has gotten a push because of this pandemic and whatever happened with China at the borders, push for India's self-reliance policy, so that now it is capable of developing its own PPE and medical equipment. Not just that, it is able to now, send some shipments to neighboring countries. And when I say neighboring countries in Indo-Pacific, it is not how US talks about Indo-Pacific, which ends at the Western Indian Ocean. For India, it extends up until Africa, includes Arabian Sea, and includes countries in the Middle East such as Iran as well. Moving on to US foreign policy's impact on India. Well, India was obviously not part of the party talks when Trump decided to pull out of Afghanistan and wanted India to take its place with its military. Of course, India declined that, but India-Afghanistan relations were getting a very good push from India's investment in Iran, in the Chabahar port, because that way India would not need to bypass Pakistan to do its trade with Afghanistan and could directly do it through Iran. However, with China now backing the main project to construct the railways between Chabahar and Zanzibar, if I'm not wrong, that is the name, which earlier India was supposed to construct. It has kind of become a little bit of a difficult situation for India as to how it's going to manage its economic commitment to Afghanistan, although the port is still being operationalized by India, still in Iran. However, the surrounding constructions are being done by China, and there is something India needs to do about it, because given its clashes with China, India's foreign policy in some parts is being perceived in Iran as speaking like like the US. It's not India. It seems like it's the US policy being pushed through India. So we need to be very clear on that. Of course, US stance over India's ban on Chinese apps has been very positive. There have been calls within the US to ban TikTok again, and even for a TikTok buyout. I mean, of course, these are very recent events, so we do not know exactly where it will go. But the important part is that US sees this India-China conflict as an opportunity for it to, to push for a stronger Indo-Pacific region, for a more prosperous and rule-based Indo-Pacific region. Hence, it is important to mention the US military presence in the South China Sea, where it sent its 2 aircraft carriers in the Philippine Sea as well. And also the PASEX exercise that was held in the Indian Ocean region, very close to the strategic Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India. So that is one of its kind exercises that was held, and it's an important, it's important for India's visibility in its own backyard, which up until now was, missing, but I mean, I shouldn't say missing, but it was kind of very limited, given the size of Chinese military presence. But that being said, India needs more visibility, more of its own foreign policy in order to engage better and independently with all its neighbors. Of course, that being said, one of the new developments was India committed to Indo-Pacific by including Australia in the Malabar 2020. Well, Malabar exercise was being held among US and India earlier, then Japan was included. earlier as an observer and then finally as a permanent member. Australia was not yet part of Malabar because of the fears of China thinking about Quad or the quadrilateral as an anti-China move and a militaristic alliance. But this year, Australia would be part of the Malabar 2020. It's not sure whether it would be a permanent member or not, but a lot of how US perceives India's neighbors, US thinks about Iran, has a lot of impact given the current geopolitics on how India is shaping its foreign policy towards these regions as well. And lastly, I'd like to talk about India's ambitions of being a great power. As I mentioned, India is trying to not just be a balancing power. It could have been contested earlier, but given the case of COVID-19 crisis, it is becoming clearer and clearer as to how India is trying to push for its development partnerships in Bangladesh, for instance.
Please come up in 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure, Professor. And also with the ITEC programs for all the SAARC and non-SAARC nations, which is one of its kind programs, India held regarding trying to talk about sharing their experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. There has been extensive medical aid to Africa, and there has been an Africa-focused working day in the Ministry of External Affairs. There are more partnerships. There is more development happening, in terms of infrastructure in Mauritius, in Maldives, in Bangladesh. India signed a memorandum of understanding on space exploration with Nigeria. And of course, there is air policy. There's a policy of air travel bubbles in which India is trying to, negotiate with how to send its medical personnel, how to get its diaspora back into Japan in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hence, it's very important. I just kind of summed up, how India's foreign policy is being shaped amid this pandemic. Very important is India's building its development-based partnerships amongst nations. It seems to be getting closer to the US in its stance towards China. India has sought to strengthen relations with Bangladesh, Maldives, and also to add to it Sri Lanka. Now with Iran, India's policies seem to be echoing US interests. However, it would be better if India could make its stance more clearer and be more independent in that aspect. Although by aligning with US, India's policy of, let's say, traditional policy of non-alignment or its strategic autonomy might seem a little bit diluted, but India's left with fewer options given the hostility it is facing in its neighborhood. And lastly, India's aspirations to play a larger role in the Indian Ocean is very well supported by nations like US and Australia that see India as a very good balancer of power to other nations like China. However, despite its medical diplomacy and development-based partnerships, these aspirations are right now not well placed with the geopolitical realities in which India will first have to mend and relook and re-examine its relation with its neighbors before taking a next step towards being a larger or a very leading part, as is the aim of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs or as the aim of our government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asta, for taking all the aspects all around the world that how India is adjusting. Of course, that all the Asian countries, they are trying to align or realign with the international community or the world powers, including United States and China. You had tried to try to understand the new normals in post-COVID-19, particularly while you're talking about the border governance, that how the states are actually looking and how you do find the state has become more surveillant state in this new normal. Of course, you have categorically pointed out that how India is facing hard competition in the Southeast Asian countries or Indo-Pacific region and in the West Asian countries, including Iran, like you have pointed out about the Chaba port and the investment and all that. But you have also pointed out that India is gathering very good sense while asking Australia to join the Malabar exercise, and you are having very categorically talked about that we are trying to manage our neighboring countries, including Bangladesh and all other countries in our neighborhood first fold. So thank you very much for making this very insightful presentation. Now I request the last speaker for today, this session is Dr. Priya Kumari. Dr. Priya Kumari is going to speak on India and the European Union, a multilateral world order. Dr. Priya, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm very much
Yes,
there.
please go ahead now. The floor is with you.
Thank you, Professor Bhardwaj, and thank you to NIICE for organizing such a conference during such pandemic time wherein we get to exchange our views, we listen to each other, which is a pleasure in today's time for sure, given that we all are locked in our houses. So the topic that I want to take it up and I wanted to talk to you all about is India-EU relations and the multilateral world order, as Professor has just said. So for this, my starting point will be the India-EU summit that recently happened in the month of July this year. There was this virtual India-EU summit that happened, and in which a roadmap was adopted by India-EU, which is also titled as India-EU Strategic Partnership, a roadmap to 2025. Features of this roadmap is that both the sides reaffirmed the necessity to preserve the rule-based international order and effective multilateralism. Well, this commitment at this point in time, I feel is very significant. Reason being, we see the collateral damage that various multilateral forums are facing. So such a commitment coming from two of the countries, one country and another organization who share similar set of values is significant and tells a lot about the future as well, that what it holds for multilateral forums. Given the current time, because of especially COVID pandemic, it has reviewed the entire idea of an integrated, frictionless or functioning world order, because states after states have declared lockdown, and because of which we see now borders, tariffs, nationalism, and in fact, for that matter, trade war is back in fashion. The global economy has fell from 3% in the first quarter of 2020 and is predicted to further fall to 27%, which is something about which we all are concerned. Tourism is the worst affected area. Many people in the sector have lost their job. The sector has faced a loss of almost $910 billion to that of somewhere around $1.2 trillion. So that is quite a loss that we are looking at. In such a scenario, in such a chaos that has been created by this pandemic, multilateral forums should have come to the rescue rather than any individual country saying that our model is the best and that's what should be adopted by other states. But unfortunately, what we see is that multilateral institutions' ability to fix these problems is increasingly getting eroded because of less interest that its member states are showing in keeping these organizations functioning. One of the examples that I would like to share is that of US and the decision made, some of the recent decisions, in fact, made by President Donald Trump of withdrawing US from many of the multilateral forums. That includes climate agreement, then WTO, and more recently WHO, which was all the more needed given the pandemic situation. And surprisingly, on the other hand, we have communist China as a part of its superpower ambition. It is trying to fill up the US spot and is ready to offer support, sustain these institutions, multilateral institutions that somewhere down the line represent liberal world order. So in this backdrop, when I look at India partnership, it is based on the shared values of democracy, pluralism, inclusiveness, rule-based multilateralism, and freedom, which is very important to reinstate or re-energize the multilateral forums that exist today. But this is something which is said in the roadmap. This is something which was even talked about in the joint declaration that came out later on after the 15th India-EU summit. But how will this be achieved? How can we strengthen multilateral forums? That's what I want to focus on in this presentation. what will be the challenges that India and EU will be facing in different sectors, and how can those challenges be overcome, and what all can India and EU do to instill energy back in these organizations. So there are three main sectors that I'm focusing on. First is that of the health sector. In an either situation, given today's time, the world would have united in the face of this common challenge of to help have a coordinated global response. But instead of that, what we see is that states are vying for influence. They're right from the development of a new medicine to its distribution, world has gone into a fierce fight. And in that, the two main actors that we see for sure is US and China. In fact, one of the economic advisors of Donald Trump, Mr. Peter Navarro, he made it very clear. In this time, there are no allies. That's what he had to say, which means that we have to go alone. Multilateral institutions do not hold any value. They will be of no relevance. Everyone has to fight for themselves. So we are back into Charles Darwin, what he has to say, survival of the fittest, in a chaotic, anarchical situation. Not just that, in fact, President Trump's administration had tried to acquire CureVac as well, which is a German biotech company, which is on the lead of discovering vaccine for COVID. And there are supplies as well that's being diverted from different international airports towards America, so that there are medicines for Americans, least concerned and least bothered about what happens to the rest of the world. And what's the position of Beijing? Where exactly they stand? They are doing all the more worse, in the sense that Beijing has in fact weaponized the various masks and the PPE kits that they are distributing to different countries for geopolitical gain, especially in Europe. Europeans were lacking these kits and masks, reason being when the first outbreak was noted in Wuhan region, Europeans were the first to supply these to Chinese. And once China recovered and the European countries were in pretty bad shape, Chinese were supplying them as to especially countries like Italy, Spain, and Serbia, saying that they have been abandoned by European Union. And China tried to show to the world that its model is the best model. The authoritarian model is the best model to contain this pandemic, and whatever masks and kits were being sent, it is just to show the goodwill of China. But the crisis, in fact, has further worsened a conflict which was going on before as well. That is US-China conflict. There was a fight. There was a sort of Cold War, which was inclusive of trade war, which was inclusive of cyber warfare between the two countries. Trump, in fact, because this pandemic has further worsened that entire conflict. In fact, Trump tweeted that somewhere in May 2020, he tweeted that WHO intentionally has ignored the report that COVID was spreading between people in Wuhan, China, and hence I cannot allow American taxpayers' money to continue to finance an organization that in its present state is so clearly not serving American interest. So this is what President Trump had to say before deciding that America will be withdrawing from WHO. And mind you, he's USA is one of the major donors as well to WHO. So who will fill up the gap? Naturally, China has, given the current scenario, they have taken up the responsibility. In fact, they have pledged to give $2 billion as well, especially to WHO to contain this coronavirus, for various projects launched by WTO to contain coronavirus. So with US now pulling out from WHO, one of the global health multilateral forums, now the onus lies with other constitutional democracies like India, like European Union, to ensure that these institutions do not get dominated by any other hegemon who's looking for an influence rather than for public good. Individually, European Union and India has been at the forefront of fighting coronavirus. And they are also of the view that that finding a vaccine that should be available, access by all, and affordable to all. That's what, in fact, in the joint declaration, the two sides stated. Individually, we can see European Union, in fact, organized on 4th of May this year, a global pledge in which international institutions and state leaders were invited. The pledge managed to, in fact, raise 7.4 billion euros. To this organization, US President Trump did not send any of his officials. China sent a very low ranking officials, showing least important towards, or giving not much of a heed or consideration to efforts made by other countries. India extended medical and other assistance to more than 150 countries to fight against COVID pandemic. And to build up resilience of different countries. In fact, according to the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliances, which is an alliance of almost 1,000 Indian companies, pharmaceutical companies, it provides 20% of worldwide sales of generic medicines, 60% of worldwide sales of vaccines, and 60% of anti-retroviral drugs for HIV AIDS treatment, confirming that the country's status is something like a world pharmacy. The main reason being that nowhere else in the world any other country offers this cheap medicine, and which are, mind you, of good quality as well. So further, India has also provided technical assistance in the form of dispatching rapid response team to countries like Kuwait and Maldives, and has set up platforms to exchange information, which is very much needed at this time when countries are even hiding information and are into cyber attacks and all of that, hacking others' countries' healthcare system. So India, in fact, even organized this ITEC training program, which was under the guidance of AIMS and the Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research in Chandigarh. So, but these are the attempts that they are making individually. Both these need to come together. EU and India need to come together. And under multilateralism, they will have to work to revive organization like WHO, a global health organization, which soon is on the verge of losing its relevance. Because going alone in today's time or in the current times is not an option. As we cannot expect separate states to go to individual countries and then start vaccinating people. That will be foolishness on our part. Hence, it's very important that health organizations, global health organizations.
Only 2 minutes for you. 2 minutes with you.
Okay, so global health organization which can give effective healthcare facilities, they should be revived, which includes WHO. So I have two other sections, that is of political forums. A strong political institution as well can effectively deal with political ramification of this current pandemic. But what we see is that the global political institution that we have right now, that is United Nations Security Council, it is politically paralyzed because of the differences that are there among the P5 member states. One of the biggest reasons for United Nations Security Council failure is, or its failure to deal with the political ramifications of pandemic times, especially rise of China and its aggressive policies towards smaller states, especially in South China Sea, and now more recently towards India as well. United Nations Security Council has not been able to effectively deal with such ramifications, such as rise of China. It more is to do with, it doesn't represent the current reality. It represents the reality of past century, 1945. It does need reform. It has been non-functional on several of the important issues, and that's all the more reasons to further democratize it. And India recently got elected, I would use the word elected to United Nations Security Council as one of the non-permanent members, which is a big achievement. This is the 8th inning that India will be starting at United Nations Security Council. It's high time that India should go along with European Union, which also wants to tame the challenge, which is of one hegemon on a decline and being taken up by other hegemon, which can even impact the sovereignty of European Union. India should work with like-minded states in European Union to further reform and democratize United Nations Security Council so that it can deal with aggressive policies of certain states, which they are taking a benefit of the time, whatever is the situation. And that's the reason they are adopting more of aggressive policies. So that ways political forums, especially United Nations Security Council, for sure can be democratized. Then as far as the economic forum is concerned, our economy as well is on a decline. The global economy, that's what I've mentioned in the initial part of my presentation. Global cooperation, collaboration and solidarity are in fact needed for an effective response, as no country individually will be able to deal with the kind of economic decline that pandemic has posed. But institutions created to attain such financial cooperation like Bretton Woods Institution and WTO as well are marred with criticism, more to do with their internal structure as well. For instance, WTO, it was formed in 1995, but still till date, it's not able to conclude any successful summits. Like Doha is still in a stalemate.
Priya, I think you will.
Yes. So that's it. So it's very important, just to conclude, that India and European Union should come together, work on different forums to establish a multilateral world order, because one hegemon on a decline cannot be taken over by another. Thank you, sir, and thank you for exceeding my time limit. I'm really sorry.
Thank you, Priya, for raising or highlighting 4 important points that particularly you have talked about the complex interdependencies in this pandemic, and there you try to bring the one sector, that pharmaceutical sector, that how it has been developed a complex interdependencies among the states in medical sector. Second point, you categorically mentioned about the US withdrawal tendencies in many international institutions and negotiations like climate change, WTO, of course, World Health Organizations, and all these issues. And of course, this is a trend that where who were the pioneer of the globalization is talking about the deglobalization in present context. And then you also categorically talked about the emerging new Cold War between the United States and China on different issues. And of course, the 4th point, you have talked about the India's role, particularly in humanitarian issues as well as cyber security assistance to the neighboring or particular country. And then you have categorically come out in all the 4 issues, keeping all together, that India and European Union should come a closer partnership in this emerging new normals or in emerging world order. So thank you very much for all the presentations. They were wonderful presentations have been made. There are a number of questions I have received from let me first, if there are any other questions, please write down in the box. So I'll take it and I'll ask the questions. First, I'll go with the panelists, with the speakers, with question, whatever the questions have been raised to them, and then I will ask all the speakers to speak in brief. But all the speakers will be given a chance, at least one round for 2 to 3 minutes, so that they can put their views on with each other. So the first question I'm asking, this is a question to Ambassador Anil. The question is, so far as India's current dispensation is concerned, the ideological disjunctive from secularism to militant majoritarianism has its considerably declined over soft power, and that is why all our South Asian nations are moving away from us. So this is basically the question to Ambassador Anil. Sir, you got the question? Hello, Ambassador, are you there? Ambassador,
Mute. So please ask him to unmute.
Is there? I don't see him. Is there?
Yeah, he's there. He's speaking, but he's unmute. He's mute.
Oh, please unmute, sir. Ambassador, please unmute.
Happens.
Now he can, because he has got disconnected. Sir, please unmute yourself.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
Yes.
Well, I saw the question, and that is a very interesting question. I would like to put it in this way, that India is a democracy where we have all the religions. India has the second largest Muslim population in the world. Unfortunately, we have not capitalized on that. We say often that because of this government's policy that you think that is pro-Hindu or pro this thing, because that has been in the media, there may be some people, but the policy, foreign policy, remains secular. And the main purpose of the foreign policy is to serve the national interest. Now, if you were to judge it, now look at the Maldives. Maldives is a Muslim nation. Look at Bangladesh. Look at our relationship with all the Middle Eastern countries, Gulf countries. Today, India's foreign policy, the biggest success of the Indian foreign policy is in West Asia, who are supposedly the custodians of the Islamic religion and the movement, and they were the supporters of Pakistan. They have withdrawn from there. Now, seeing what is there. So our problem in the region, of course, I do not condone at all any statements, any extraneous rightist, ultra-rightist thing that talks about against any particular religion. Now, India has, as far as officially it's concerned, I mean, Prime Minister Modi himself is on record. We have excellent relations with all the countries which are Islamic in the world. But on the other hand, if you were to just take the religion as one aspect of it, look at sometimes we have misunderstandings with Nepal, which is a Hindu country. We have problems with sometimes misunderstandings with Bhutan or with Bangladesh, which also has 2 crore Hindus. So Sri Lanka, for that matter. So this is something that has nothing to do with religion per se, as far as our neighborhood is concerned. It is more to do with the current regional realities where you have another very big country which is trying to contain your influence in the region. That is something, in my view, is the problem. Because if you on balance, I disagree completely with the statements that come out by certain sections within the Indian political, especially the political landscape, which should be not be condoned by anyone. And this is, I don't think, is condoned. But India must play its secular credentials. It's even, I would say, as far as India's Islamic credentials are concerned, they are extremely strong, being the second largest Muslim nation in the world. It must be capitalized within our foreign policy domain. Because many people do not know, because we do not talk about it. And we need to talk about it. And I can count so many people, but since there were 2 or 3 minutes, I stop at that.
Thank you, Ambassador. The second question is to Dr. Rajiv Ranjan. It is basically it's a comment, or you can respond for that. It is wrong to say that India has failed in dealing effectively with the pandemic. India's recovery rate is more than 75% of total infections, and its fatality rate is the lowest in the world. India's incidence of cases need to be seen in the context of its large population of 1.4 billion. India's leadership continues to be supported enthusiastically by its people. So this is the comment. If you want to say, Dr. Rajiv, anything?
Thank you, Professor. I would go backwards. I did not comment on the leadership failure, because I said is the leadership proactively responded to contain the COVID, right? But I was talking about the failure in the system. So I would not go into comment on the leadership. But now when we're talking about India recovery rate, we have to also talk about how India is recovering in economic sector. And there is a survey that has said that the Indian economy has contracted at the rate of 18%. Millions of jobs have been lost. And this is, I'm not saying, even the finance minister has said that it's an act of God. So even the coronavirus is like, has pushed Indian economy in a very dangerous, kind of like in a recession mode. So here, we cannot just say that by recovery rate, even we haven't achieved the peak level in the COVID. So it would be wrong to assume that we have recovered, we have contained, because we yet to even reach the peak level and then try to recover in economic, in the political, even in the social sector. Like when we talk about the laborers who has moved or back to their home, they are yet to return. Even they are like, even they are at a home, they don't have any sustainable job or even the kind of like food or like income to sensitive manner, rather than trying to say that we have recovered only by containing the case. So I would just stop here.
Thank you very much. Now, the third question is Dr. Asta. Asta is the question: how do you look at this prospects that do USA and India have that wherewithal and a material capacity to counter China in Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific region? Indo-Pacific is the America's construct of its failed strategy of Asian pivot, which USA has failed to execute properly since the world liberal international order is failing like pack of cards. Even China has come up with the new Quad formation in the India's immediate neighbors, that is Pakistan, Nepal, Afghanistan, and Sri Lanka. So, what are India's strategic choice to deal with these alarming issues? This is a question from Tahir Bhatt. He's a PhD scholar in Kashmir University. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Sanjay. Thank you, Tahir, for your question. And okay, I'll answer your question in three parts. Since you talked about Quad and US capabilities, one is, why there was a threat, within the Indo-Pacific idea, why China was seeing it, especially the Quad, as anti-China. In that background, India's policy has always been of inclusion. Hence, free and open Indo-Pacific for India is free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, which is FOIIP. Spelling it out that way means that India has always pushed for including China within FOIP, including all the powers, in fact, even European powers, into the Indo-Pacific. There was a joint exercise held with France. There were exercises held with Vietnam. The reason for that was that Indo-Pacific is not a geographical construct made as a concert of powers, if I could say. It is of like-minded nations which can come together and ensure that the region is going to be peaceful and prosperous for all the nations, no matter how big or small the power is. The second part of your question was whether US is capable. Look, if US were that capable of handling all of the Indo-Pacific on its own, it would not have, relied on partnerships with Japan or Australia. The point is that in this current world order, we need more partnerships. We need to come together. And one good example of this is the COVID-19 crisis. No country alone can come out of it completely unless everybody else around them is safe as well. Given that, in that backdrop, it's extremely essential for nations like, let's say, like China or Pakistan, who might feel certain kind of threat from India, trying to be closer to the US, to understand that there is one aspect of national security. However, right now we are dealing with a global pandemic, which means a global health security, right? As for the nations, the democratic nations of the Quad nations like Australia, Japan, US, and India, it is important to understand that they do not pose of having a military exercise or anything as being a direct threat in the face of any other nation. It is more about cooperation. The third aspect of your question, I'll just quickly address it in one sentence. The point of all these military exercises is not to pose a threat to any big power or a medium power or a small nation. It is to engage in interoperability, to engage in possibilities of engaging in humanitarian aid related operations in the future, such as what happened. So you must know that Quad initially was born out of an exercise to help tsunami in 2004. Hence, given at it not from that realistic lens, given at it from the reality that we are facing today, international cooperation has, as has already been elaborated and stressed upon by Ambassador Anil, by Dr. Priya, Dr. Rajiv Ranjan, and everyone else, it is extremely important that nations look at it more of a cooperative mechanism rather than being an anti, to their power in any which way or hegemony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the next question is basically it is not addressed to a specific speaker. So I will ask anyone wants to respond for this. The question is, how power is decaying in the post-COVID world? Since we are on the onset of a very fragile world order where the states have grown more dogmatic and belligerent, like China, Russia, Turkey, Israel, India, Korea. Power distribution is uneven in the changing global configurations of the world politics. Will this uneven power distributions and belligerence of states lead to an entropy of the world politics and would unfold negative energy in the international politics? This is again a question from Tahir Bhatt, a scholar from Kashmir University. Yes. Ambassador, would you like anyone? Ambassador, I would ask Professor Khadge also for responding for this.
Thank you, Professor Sanjay. Before I touch upon these points, I would like to clear a couple of other stuff. Like when I was speaking, probably I could not convey clearly that Professor Sanjay has understood something other way around. Like when I was talking about India is shifting from non-aligned to multi-aligned, not multinational, multilateral. Multi-aligned means issue-based, like alliance with China, in Russia, and then United States of America at a time, like multi-aligned, unlike multilateral. That I just wanted to make clear. Next point, Tahir Bhatt from Kashmir University, he was very roughly calculated and a perspective like Quad among India's immediate neighbor. I very honestly, gently, and humbly request Tahirji, please do not misunderstand. Nepal will never ever will join in any Quad-like military alliances. Please do not drag us to Pakistan, Afghanistan. They do have their own maybe past and maybe their own strategic calculation. For us, our survival strategy as well. We will never ever join any. I think you might have attended our foreign minister's deliberation a while ago in the morning, and any documents so far you can find in our oldest foreign ministry in South Asia is a Munshi Khana, some 1,000 years old. Any documents, and from now on as well, Nepal will not. Probably you might have guessed a couple of weeks ago, our foreign minister attended webinars like this webinar, and where Afghan and Pakistani foreign minister also were there. But that doesn't like try to. There should be such kind of webinar every month, even between India and Nepal as well. So we will always respect our valued relationship, unlike undermining our very century-long relationship. So that please do not misunderstand. Being an academic, I don't represent government, but being an academic as well, no Nepali, even very common man, cannot presume that we will be the part of course, India is an aspiring power you can be, you are free to do a member of Quad, IPS, whatever. You can be a NATO member as well. That's your choice. But for us, we don't. We won't. Never ever. So that Afghan and Pakistan, sometime, you know, that I also had similar, in a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to discuss with an Indian friend, in IDSA friend, who is my good friend. So he was like blaming the, like Karachi has hashtag, something like that way. So please, please, my humble request, let you do not drag us to Afghan and Pakistan. They do have their own strategic interests, their own national interests. We are nowhere in between. So that's my standpoint. So officially, I just wanted to make clear. So far is the last.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, queries by Professor Sanjay. Well, of course, post-COVID old scenario still unclear. These are all hypotheses. There are some reason behind, as my friend Rajiv, we are working in some point. In the meantime, we exchanges views in conferences in Shanghai, in Delhi, even in somewhere in Kerala also in 2015. So Ms. Chadda, I was graduate from next year University in Kyoto, so that I do know about that parts of the globe as well. Glad to hear you're studying Jamaican. There are so many professors to whom I know. So what I'm trying to say is that all calculation or hypotheses are yet to be tested. So post-COVID global order is yet to be like highly, it's not, we are South Asian, especially Indian and Nepalese, we believe in astronomy as well. Even if the very scientific astronomers cannot like, proclaim at the moment what will be the situation. Seems like some indicators are there. The China-US Cold War will be deepened, and Russia will play in between, and the liberal international order is deteriorating. So EU is in dilemma. These are all kind of like social science discourses. So I cannot say what will be the fate of the global order, right? On the basis of the indicators what we have been looking at the moments. So this is just my simple observation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before going to Ambassador Anil, I would ask Dr. Priya if she wants to add something. Dr. Priya, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm fine, I guess. Ambassador Anil can respond to it.
Okay. Now I'll give 2 minutes to each speaker. So please sum up, conclude your observations and any other questions. Please, Ambassador Anil, please.
Thank you. Professor, the question that was being asked about the state power, how it is going to, what are the main ingredients? In my view, apart from what we traditionally know, the only two major ingredients in this 21st century, especially the later half, and the COVID-19 has actually accelerated this transition that was already happening in the global world order. That is the technological superiority, and economic strength. These are essentially the two things that will decide on how strong or how weak a power is. And that is where I believe that India is very well slated, because we do not have animosity or conflicting relationships to the extent that some other powers are facing that. So we could be a good bridge, and India has, as far as the artificial intelligence or IT is concerned, or all, if we can harness it properly. So those are two very important things that are going to be there. As far as India's overall foreign policy, I spoke at great length, and I think that again, I would say just two things: economy, economy, economy. These are the three things that are going to decide our future.
Do you want to comment on the Chinese squad in South Asia? Do you want to comment on that?
No, I don't think Afghanistan is at all part of it. Even though tomorrow Taliban comes into power, Taliban's statements, if you remember on Kashmir, they said it is internal part of India. So I don't think it's emerging that way. It is a figment of imagination of Pakistan. And frankly, I did not want to make it into India-Pakistan kind of a thing, but I have just recently written an article about Pakistan. The Pakistan has done a greatest disservice to itself by its own leadership, or deep state as it is. Now they are virtually part of the one state of China in a way. I mean, today as the things are moving, whether it is EPC or anything, Afghanistan, they have tried to, one word I will say, that Pakistan has very smartly so far encashed its nuisance value vis-a-vis big powers. But that time is up now, and they have to look after their own interest. Thank you.
Dr. Rajiv.
Yeah, thank you. As we know that power has many variations. So we talk about political, military, or economic. And Mr. Anil has already talked about the economic and political power. So when we talk about the whole system, and the realist school of belief that this is a system where there is no hierarchy, unlike the national government. But if we see the whole system is hierarchical also, whether it's United Nations Security Council permanent membership, whether it's NSG membership. So this is hierarchical. So now when we talk about the power, then we have to read also Rise and Fall of Paul Kennedy book, when it talks about whether it's your economic might is helping your military power projection. And right now is Chinese economic rise is helping China to project. And at the same time, it's contracting the United States. So we see how US is withdrawing from Afghanistan. So we have to see. Now, when we talk about the power projection and decaying power in post-COVID world order, I think we have to also look what was in pre-COVID era. So when we talk about whether, like now coming to the India, we know about when we compare about the great power status of India in the world system, we have acquired at least all of them, except a kind of like political power, because we don't have a membership of United Nations Security Council. So we cannot leverage our position. Now, if you will look at how the Chinese have leveraged its position in United Nations Security Council. If you look at from 1973 to till date, 2017, it has not used its veto power more frequently. It is coming to 11 times, I guess. Or maybe now from 2018 to 2020, maybe twice, or in the case of Syria. So we have to see how China is going to play its position at the United Nations Security Council. So it comes from the political, that of that organization gives you a political power. So whether you have this military power, you have economic power, but it depends on also about how you like take a maneuver your political power. And it also comes from the soft power, because we talked about Joseph now, and then there is also a smart power. So when we talk about the soft power, China lacks in soft power. Now that's why they are trying to kind of like increase this power projection, soft power projection, by establishing Confucius Institute, giving a very generous scholarship in the South Asian country or even African countries. So we have seen. We also see.
Dr. Rajiv, please sum up. Yeah. Only
okay. So we have to do, and in the case of India, we have this kind of like soft power that we just have to exploit it. So I think for now, I think we haven't exploited much. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Asta, would you like to add something? 2 minutes, not.
Sure, Professor. Thank you very much to all the panelists for spelling out what your thoughts are. I just like to say, apart from soft power and military power, there's one thing which makes India very unique in the international circles, and that is the power of ideas India has. The way India has projected itself through its identity of being a peace-loving nation. That has helped India earlier also. It will continue to help India even now in its, we could call it a mission to become a bigger economic power or whatever. But alongside that, as long as India keeps maintaining an image of being a non-hostile, a nation not looking to, attack another one or trying to undermine another one, going through peaceful coexistence, as has been our foreign policy since forever. It's not about non-alignment. I mean, this new idea of issue-based alignments or multilateralism is kind of a continuation of the non-alignment, as Professor Sanjay had already said previously too.
Exactly.
And I believe that as well. I mean, I totally agree with that. Hence, that is a power of India, which is why India is considered as one of the leaders, you know, whether be it in the circles of NAM or be it in the circle of Solar Alliance. So India has the power. It's not just about the aggressive power. I'm talking about the power of ideas and the ideals and norms. India is the biggest democracy, and those are our strengths. And as long as we can play well with those strategically in a nice way, in a holistic way, you know, we're helping all nations around us develop, maintaining good relations. I think there is nothing stopping a nation like India or nations within South Asia from progressing, if not together.
Okay, thank you. I think any other panelists want to say something, or is it okay? Shall I take the floor?
One second, sir. 1 second.
Yes, please.
I would also like to just...
Once again, Professor Shukla, Sanjay, and Ms. Asta, multi-aligned and multilateralism are different discourses. Please do not misguide us. You are the great nation, so please do not misguide us. It's a different
thank you very much, because thank you very much. But I think that what you mean about the non-alignment foreign policy was also an independent foreign policy, and you are free to align with anybody. So please take in that positive spirit. Yeah, Priya, you would like to add something?
I would just like to conclude. From my side, what I have to say that pandemic situation, definitely a lot of uncertainty looming the world, and states are individually taking certain action. The most immediate one that they took was declaring lockdown. Slowly and gradually, they are opening up that, but we need
I think Priya's voice has she has lost. So are you hearing me, others?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Perfect.
Okay. Now it was wonderful presentation from all the parts and all the speakers from China, from Nepal, from India, from diplomatic community, from academic communities. Wonderful, very good contribution. I'm really happy to enrich myself by your presentations, and you have raised wonderful points in your presentations. Of course, there were points that where we talk about the power of arguments or argument of power. What is that important has become in this post COVID society or in the new normal. Of course, there are very strong demand, or you can say call from the society, that we need a state that ensure mutual assured survival, not the mutual assured destruction. And that mutual assured survival would come when we will talk about the human security, when we will talk about the societal security, when we will focus more on health, we will focus more on education. Then you can make a new world order, new society, because the pandemic had taught us that still we are in the age of where the racial discriminations were there. Today also you see the racial discriminations. You see today that again there is a discrimination on gender basis. The women were the most sufferer in this pandemic, and for the domestic violence or for other kinds of violence. And then you have seen that whatever the liberalizations had created, the world had become a cause of disaster or cause of crisis or cause of pandemic. So you need a regulated, very calculated society, a resilient society, a cohesive society. So wonderful presentations from all these points. Of course, there were India was in the center of all discussions, and there are 2 points I do find that there were issues of structural aspects as well as the functional aspects of dealing the foreign policy or new international order. In the structural aspects, of course, that India and the neighboring countries' structural issues like the size, like the military, like economy had become a factor, had become in education of the neighborhood policy or neighborhood first policy. India tried to manage, being a regional power, tried to engage the neighboring countries by different policy perspectives, giving aid and assistance, giving line of credit, reaching to them for whatever the needs, like the reaching to Nepal during the earthquake and all these issues. Of course, we were also being very alert while there were crises in Sri Lanka, or there were crises in Bangladesh in 1971, and there were crises in Maldives. So we try to address the structural issues. Yes, we are in structure, we are a regional power, but we have equal responsibilities. But there are again structural issues as arise between India and China. Of course, China is mightier than India in the military and in the economy, and that how that China is coexisting with its neighbor is a question. Either you are coming to the neighboring countries or in South Asia in a constructive manner, or you are coming to engage or encircle the country, need to be analyzed, need to be assessed. Of course, India's foreign policy had been dominated, there are trends in India's foreign policy that India is giving emphasis to its economic diplomacy to mobilize investment and trade with all over the world, including South Indo-Pacific region, as well as with the West Asian countries and the Central Asian countries. And to keep that, India is also very conscious about its security, and they are going for the conscious strategic partnership. Like today, India has about 37 countries strategic partnership, and of course, it is not like Quad is a discourse among the international community, but India is not interested to go have a strategic or military alliances with these countries. India is more willing to have an economic engagement with these Quad countries or comprehensive partnership. So the third, of course, very categorically it has come out about India's strength. What is the India's strength is the soft power. That soft power, it gives the aids to India to dominate the world discourse, being a soft power, being the leading largest functional democracy in the world, being a secular power, being a cultural power, had extensive linkages to Southeast Asian countries and with the West Asian countries and the world community. So India has that strength that India should advocate had more effective soft power strategy to ensure mutual assured survival among the countries. And for that, India is.
Sir, we have to end the session because we are running late by 15 minutes.
Yes. Pramod, last point. Very carefully, we are moving towards the neighborhood policy as well. So these are the all issues that had been raised while we are discussing. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Pramod, for giving this platform. And I had really enjoyed with all deliberations from different speakers and this platform as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished chairs, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the third session, I deem it a great honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of NICE and WPC to all who have graced us with your presence and contributed their parts to make this session a resounding success. First of all, I would like to express our profuse gratitude and sincere thanks to Professor Sanjay K. Bhardwaj for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. Our sincere thanks also goes to all our speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such a comprehensive and convincing presentation. We are really honored to have you all the speakers with us here today. I would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for all our audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making the session productive with your questions. We are truly honored to have you all with us, and we hope to stay connected with you in future as well. It's been a real pleasure. Also, do join us at our next session. Thank you so much.